Hi, my name is Sheila McLaughlin. I'm with DATATRAK International. I'm the International Director of Quality Assurance, and I'm going to speak to you today about eSource, in particular the guidance that the FDA has put out that is now in draft form regarding electronic source data in clinical trials. The title of the guidance put out by FDA is called Guidance for Industry, Electronic Source Documentation in Clinical Investigations. There are 4 topics of discussion in this presentation. The first is the intentions of the guidance. What does FDA intend to accomplish by putting out this guidance to the industry? What are the related regulations and guidelines that pertain to this guidance? And what are the definitions and what do they mean? There's some existing definitions that are clarified and there's some new definitions that exist in this guidance. And finally, we'll discuss what this guidance means to DATATRAK, what it means to all of us in the clinical trial industry. The intentions of this guidance are clear. The FDA has outlined 4 specific intentions, but overall, the FDA is promoting the use of electronic systems in clinical trials. They want to eliminate unnecessary duplication of data, transcription errors, promote real-time entry and electronic source during subject visits, and of course, overall ensure the accuracy and completeness of the data related to the clinical trial. The FDA is explicitly encouraging the use of electronic source data in this guidance. They want to see not only that clinical data is entered in electronic form, they want to see that that is the actual source. The original source data is in electronic form. They believe in electronic formats for ensuring accuracy and ensuring that the data is maintained and will meet the requirements that are later required for record keeping and record retention. There are 3 related regulations and guidelines that are mentioned in the eSource guidance. Computerized systems used in clinical investigations, of course, Part 11 for electronic signatures and electronic records, and then the general principles for software validation. These guidances have been the foundation for DATATRAK to build our quality management system, our validation techniques, and overall our general SOPs and guidelines. So we feel like we're on the right track, and this just further emphasizes that this is the direction FDA wants to go with the clinical industry. The term eSource is not formally defined in FDA regulations, but here in this draft guidance, eSource is defined as clinical data initially documented in electronic health records maintained by hospitals and institutions. This is talking about ECRFs, lab reports, medical images that are coming in from devices, even electronic diary entries provided by study subjects. Ultimately, the FDA wants to know where the data came from and when it was inputted into the system. If source data is still on paper, they want that data inputted into the system, but they want the paper source maintained. The ECRF definition is also in this guidance, and it's not changed, but I think it's clarified whenever the FDA says they want this to be a vehicle used to assemble all the data not only from electronic, but from paper-based systems as well. They want to, again, capture all the data and organize all this diverse data in a manner that satisfies the study protocol. They want it to be systemically reviewed and analyzed real-time by investigators, other authorized parties, and of course, as necessary by the FDA during inspections. Regarding the data that is entered into the system or entered into the eSource, FDA wants to identify what elements and what specific identifiers need to be captured for each piece of data. So they have these 3 definitions in the guidance. The first is data element. This is going to be a single observation associated with the subject in a clinical study. The data element identifier is going to be a tag that's related to this data element, and it's going to include the origin, the date and time of entry, and it's going to show which study subject specifically to whom the data element applies. Third, there's going to be a data originator. This is going to be who originated the data into the ECRF. It could be a person, a device, or maybe even an instrument authorized to enter the data. This is a table pulled directly from the guidance showing a good example of a data element identifiers, and data originators from an electronic record related to a clinical trial. You should ensure your EDC or your eSource vendor can support reporting capabilities recommended like this by the FDA. The FDA also identifies 3 tiers of data management as some of their new definitions in this guidance. First is Tier 1, and this is for data entry. Tier 2 is going to be data review, and then Tier 3 is data processing and transmission. We'll see more specifics on the following slides. This slide shows a diagram taken directly from the draft guidance. This diagram clearly outlines what the FDA expects related to the 3 tiers of data management. Tier 1 represents the various data originators, or the original observations, that can be directly entered or transmitted into the ECRF. Source data can be captured initially on paper and then later entered into an electronic system. It's also noted in the guidance that each data originator should be authorized through a unique username and password to allow entry of data into the platform. Tier 2 represents data review and approval. Through the right platform, this can be all performed by authorized users from anywhere in the world. And finally, there's Tier 3, which represents the final step, data processing and transmission. Retention periods are mentioned in the guidance, and they talk about both device studies and drug studies and the retention periods expected by the FDA. Investigators are required to maintain adequate and accurate case histories. For device studies, they are required to maintain records for a period of 2 years after the date on which the investigation is terminated or completed, or the date that the records are no longer required for the purposes of supporting a pre-market approval application. Retention periods are mentioned also for drug studies, and note for both this slide and the previous slide, none of this is new information, it's just reference to existing regulations. For drug studies, records must be retained for a period of 2 years following the date a marketing application is approved for the drug or the indication for which is being investigated, or if there's no application to be filed until 2 years after the investigation is discontinued and the FDA is notified. So what are your next steps? Well, companies need to evaluate their EDC vendors, and they need to see if not only are they eSource capable, are they eSource compliant. The DATATRAK eClinical Suite meets and exceeds the requirements outlined in this new eSource draft guidance. Please contact your sales representative for more information on eSource and compliance systems.